At last, Prince Aaron could retreat to his study. He had received a new shipment of artifacts from the Orient that he was eager to examine. Opening his study door, Aaron caught his breath excitedly when he saw the large crate that had been placed on his desk. He rushed to his desk and pried the lid off the crate. What would it contain this time, he wondered. Last time it had been some golden goblets encrusted with jewels, and the time before that it was a small jade carving of what Aaron had guessed was a mythological character. The figure had 8 arms and long ears. Aaron stood on his toes to peer inside the large crate. Inside was roll after roll of papyrus. Ancient writings, thought Aaron. His hands trembled and his breath shook as he carefully drew out a scroll. The scroll was well preserved, Aaron noted. He hoped the writing would be in a language he knew. He found it hard not to be proud of his skills as a linguist. His father had appreciated Aaron's desire to learn the languages of other peoples and had hired tutors from around the world to teach him any language he wished to learn. So far, Aaron could speak all the major languages of Europe and a few languages of Arabia and the Far East. Aaron slowly unrolled the scroll and examined the characters on the page. He squinted a bit, then he turned the ancient document upside down. The language appeared to be a combination of several Eastern languages, but he thought if he worked through each line carefully, he could make out the general idea of the passage. 3 minutes later, he figured out the first line, which read as follows: The personal records of Shah Omar of Sultanabar. Sultanabar, thought Aaron. He had heard of that place before. He read on. Shah Omar seemed to keep diligent records of everything that went on in his palace. One thing that stood out to Aaron was that Shah Omar often mentioned a merchant named Ali. Even strangers when Shah Omar once referred to Ali as his father-in-law. Now why, thought Aaron, would a king marry the daughter of a commoner? Aaron knew his father would never let him marry a peasant. Still, the question of whether common girls were just as good as noble ones gnawed at his mind. Aaron stopped reading as an idea came to his head. He knew just the way to find out. Eloise breathed in a sigh of relief along with the fresh air as she stepped outside. This time of the day was just one of her favorites. True, she admitted, she was out here to tend to the ever-growing loads of laundry her stepsisters seemed to enjoy making for her. But any time outside was outside nonetheless. Her stepsisters, Daphne with her shrill voice and ridiculous demands, and Elora with her constant daydreams and absurd romantic notions, were certainly no picnic to live with. And Eloise savored any time she could spend away from them. If only her father would return. It had been 3 years since he had left for his latest trip to the Orient, and Eloise had not heard from him since. Before he left, he charged her to obey her stepmother and be kind to her stepsisters. If he only knew how far her agreement to that request would take her. Here she was, a virtual slave to people who called her family, but did not treat her like family. If only there were a way to escape, thought Eloise. Run away from this awful life and never, ever return. Eloise scrubbed Daphne's frock with vigor. She made a habit of venting her grief and bitterness by working extra hard. She was determined not to become a miserable wreck. She must stay strong and think of a way to... Eloise's thoughts were interrupted by screams coming from inside the house. What is it this time? She wondered. More likely as not, Daphne was gazing longingly into her mirror and found a single hair was out of place. Or perhaps Elora had seen a mouse and was hoping her cries would compel a knight in shining armor to come and save her. Eloise! Come quickly! Eloise whipped around to see Elora hanging out the window above her. Oh, Eloise, it's the most wonderful news! My dreams are finally coming true! Elora began to sing dreamily. Eloise rolled her eyes. Leave it to Elora to act as if she were in a fairy tale. Eloise considered herself a rationalist, a realist with no time for daydreams. Only real plans. She sighed and hung the dripping laundry on the line. Then she reluctantly trudged into the house to see what Elora was raving about. You called, Miss Elora? Eloise asked in the manner required by her stepmother as she opened the door to Elora's chamber. Oh, Eloise! Elora twirled as she clutched the parchment to her chest. This is the best day of my life! Prince Aaron is having a ball in a fortnight, and every maiden within 50 miles of the capital is invited. Even peasants, that means me! Eloise raised an eyebrow. It wasn't like royalty to allow commoners at grand events. But if peasants were invited, so that means me as well, she said more to herself than to Elora. Perhaps, if Eloise had a chance to go to the castle, she could get a job there. Laura obviously had not heard Eloise's comment, as she rambled on without acknowledging Eloise had ever even spoken. "And it's to be a masquerade ball, too, which means—" She jerked to a stop, her eyes wide. "I have nothing to wear!" Laura flung herself down into her bed and sobbed. "Now I'll never be able to go!" Eloise rolled her eyes. Trust Laura to live in constant melodrama. "I'm sure we can find you something suitable to wear, Miss Laura," said Eloise. Laura hopped up. "Oh, do you really think we could? I just have to be the most beautiful girl there. Oh, what if the principal's in love with me?" Eloise sighed. This was going to be a long 2 weeks. "I still don't see why you would invite commoners to your party, dear." Aaron looked up from the scroll he was reading as his mother, Queen Dorothea, spoke to him. "I just want to see what the common people are like," he answered. "Is that really so bad?" "That is not a bad motive," agreed Queen Dorothea. "But I was hoping you would invite more ladies and duchesses, girls who would make a good future wife." "Who says my wife even has to be royal?" Aaron blurted. Queen Dorothea was shocked. "Well, she sputtered. "But what would people say?" "What do you mean, Mother?" "Well, son, surely you know the social rules." "I'm beginning to question all these rules, written or not, about class distinctions, and who can marry whom. I mean, is how important a person is really the measure of his or her worth?" Aaron rose from his seat and paced the room. What if everyone considered a person's true merits instead of social status or the amount of money that person has? Would that be so bad? Queen Dorothea had no answer to her son's query. Aaron slapped his scroll down on his desk. "I'm going for a ride." He yanked his coat from its peg, for it was a brisk October afternoon, and stormed into the castle. In the stable, Aaron whistled for his horse, Strider. After swinging into the saddle, he nudged Strider into a run. Aaron didn't know exactly where he was going, but he didn't care. Eloise draped the rug over the clothesline and gave it a hard whack with the rug beater. She tried not to inhale the dust that flew over the rug in thick gray clouds. Suddenly, she heard a strange noise. It sounded like hoofbeats. Eloise turned and gasped. Aaron's mind wandered far from the forest path as Strider galloped on. All of a sudden, the trees stopped. Aaron, his mind now snapping back to reality, blinked in the sun as he tried to see where he was going. But it was too late. Aaron cried out and flailed his arms as something big and heavy seemed to have been thrown over his head. Getting hold of the reins, he pulled back, and Strider halted, jostling his rider. Eloise slowly got up from the ground. She'd had to dive out of the way when that reckless horseman rode straight through her clothesline. Dusting herself off, she faced the horse, its rider trapped under the rug. He was thrashing around, trying to get the carpet off his head. Eloise huffed in disgust as she ripped the rug off the man. Aaron felt the big heavy thing being removed from his head. He was finally free! Looking down, he was surprised to see a young woman glaring up at him. "Just who do you think you are?" Eloise shouted up at the young man. "Just tearing through my yard like that? And above all, trying to steal my rug? You've got a lot of nerve, sir." Aaron felt at a loss for words. Even in her fury, this girl was breathtakingly beautiful. She'd had golden brown hair which fell into soft bangs and ringlets, and her warm brown eyes shone. Her cheeks were flushed like her inner fire. Aaron shook his head. I'm sorry." Eloise scoffed. "You'd better be. I'll have you know that nothing here is worth stealing, so you may just be on your merry way. Good day, sir." She turned her back to the man and began to right the clothesline. She shook the rug and laid it over the line again. Then she stopped, looking back over her shoulder at the young man, who was still standing behind her. Aaron studied the girl, who now had her back to him. Who is she? He wondered. She accused me of having nerve, but she is the one who is brave. No other peasant would speak so to a prince. Slowly, Aaron dismounted. "I'm really very sorry, miss," he began. "I didn't mean to ride into your clothesline." Eloise turned her back to her work, ignoring the man. He was wasting her time, and the last thing she wanted was to be late finishing her chores, which would incur her stepmother's wrath. Just go away, she thought. Aaron coughed. The girl was beating the rug now, stirring up a cloud of dust. What is your name?" he asked tentatively. Eloise didn't turn around. Eloise, she stated without emotion. Eloise Svensson. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must finish my work. Svensson? Aaron recognized the name. I know someone by that name. Geoffrey Svensson, merchant to the Orient. Eloise spun around. That's my father! He left on business 3 years ago and has not yet returned. How do you know him? Well, I happen to be a frequent purchaser of goods from the Orient. You must have a good deal of money, then, Eloise observed, for only the rich can afford to buy imports on a regular basis. She must not know who I am, thought Aaron. He wondered if he should tell her. No, he thought. He liked being spoken to as if he were a regular person. Eloise wasn't trying to impress him. She was just treating him as she would anyone else. I have some money, he admitted. Well, then you'd have to be a duke or an earl or even a prince yourself. Yes, Aaron coughed again. This time because Eloise had hit so close to the truth. Something like that. Are you going to the prince's ball, then? Strangely, Eloise found herself hoping he was. Someone with such an interest in the old and exotic would not be a dull conversationalist. Perhaps he might even know where her father was. Eloise continued, Surely there will be other young men there as well, for I'm sure the prince cannot possibly dance with every single maiden. I believe I will be there, Aaron answered, trying his best not to smile too broadly. Will you? Eloise shrugged. Perhaps, but more to catch a ride with my stepsisters than to actually do much dancing. I hope to get a job at the castle as a maid. Are the people here not treating you well? What about your sisters? Oh, never mind them, Eloise replied. They're really just my stepsisters and certainly don't treat me as family, so I'm hoping to leave soon. I'm sorry to hear that. Aaron felt genuinely sorry for this lovely, courageous maiden. Perhaps he could make it certain she would get a job at the castle. Then he could see her more often. Nothing you can do about it. Well, actually, Aaron started. Eloise! A shrill voice came from the house. Who are you talking to? Eloise gave a start. Her stepmother. You should leave, she whispered urgently. What? Asked Aaron. Who is that? My stepmother. Don't let her see you. Eloise practically shoved Aaron toward Strider. Now go, please. Aaron quickly mounted. I will see you at the ball, then? I believe so. Eloise smiled in spite of her panic. Then she took a desperate glance back toward the house. Aaron took one last look at Eloise before urging Strider back to the forest. Eloise turned and began to beat the rug again. That was close, she breathed. When she finished the chore, she returned to the house. Eloise, I have a job for you. Eloise's stepmother, Dame Hildegard, snapped when Eloise wasn't even 2 feet inside the house. Yes, madam? Eloise asked, curtsying per her stepmother's orders. Eloise, as you may have heard from, Laura. Dame Hildegard nodded towards her younger daughter, who was twirling and giggling through the kitchen, still clutching the invitation to her bosom. You may have heard about the prince's ball, which will occur in a fortnight. You are to immediately begin on gowns for Daphne, Alora, and myself. Dame Hildegard droned on with further instructions and demands for Eloise, and Daphne and Alora added their own comments and demands. Eloise half listened with a secret smile on her face, thinking of the strange young man and his mysterious introduction. She wondered just who he was and what he might know about her father. Getting ready for the prince's ball wouldn't be so dull after all.